Welcome to One on One. I'm Greg Bassey, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. It's another big day here at PAC 14. We've got our Wicomico County Council President, John Cannon, is in the house. John, welcome.
I'm glad to be here.
So the budget's done. You're in the new year.
Sure.
How was the budget process this year?
The budget process went very well. We made a lot of different changes, which I was glad to see. You never know exactly what to anticipate when you get the budget and what might develop. I guess the biggest change that the council made was the Board of Education and the maintenance of effort, which I think was a real plus for the council and the county as a whole.
Yeah, that was monumental for you guys. You actually increased the maintenance of effort by $500,000.
Right. Initially, the executive put the money, $750,000 in one time only, which doesn't go towards the maintenance of effort formula.
Right.
That's a
very
long story in
complicated,
itself. But we recognize that in order to do one-time only contributions as such, the first thing you have to do, you're required by March to fill out some extensive paperwork with the state of Maryland so that the state of Maryland can approve that one-time only expenditure. That wasn't done, so we had to cut that $750. What we ended up doing was to rebalance everything and also to keep the contribution with the Board of Education. We took what I consider to be a much greater step, and we committed $500,000, $500,000 of that specifically to the Board of Education's operating budget, which was an increase in the maintenance of effort. Why I say that's so crucial is the fact that not only was it an additional $500 this year, but that literally commits the county to that additional $500,000 every single year from here on out. So it's a long-term commitment, and I think it was a very I was very generous, and it was a very strategic move on the part of the council for the Board of Education.
Right. And you have to give the executive credit too. I mean, he identified the security thing. He put the money out there, but he said school board can do whatever it wants with it. And then you guys took that commitment and made it work in terms of an MOE problem.
Well, I wasn't sure. I really wasn't sure what the 750 was. I mean, the actual terminology was for the council to decide what it might want to do.
Right.
The true security designation, I don't know how legitimate that was, because normally if you're going to commit $750,000 to anything, I think there should be an itemized list of what it was for.
Right.
So it was very vague as to what this allotment was representing.
Well, and they were waiting to see what the state was going to do, because the state wanted to spend some money on security for schools.
Well, that may be true, but we know the state's going to make a lot of commitments over the next year. But when we cut a budget, we have to make sure it's for an itemized account. What we did in this case is that we wanted to make sure that this 500 was to develop the pre-K process.
Right.
I think the majority of the council felt that it was necessary to begin this. Children entering kindergarten at 5 years old, you've heard me say it before.
Right.
We've been doing that for probably over 100 years. And in this day and age, I don't think it hurts to begin teaching these children who are, I think, much more exposed to everything nowadays, even at that early age, to begin that process of acclimation at 4 years old. The big key comes in, and what I think initially some people say is, oh, well, now you're taking care of, it's almost a daycare. Well, that's not really true at 4. That's not really happening at 4 years old. I think they're beyond that. But what it does do, which is encouraging to me, is that not only will it teach them educational benefits early on, but I'm really anxious to see how it impacts them as far as social and emotional skills.
Right.
Where they get out into the public earlier and they begin to, exchange ideas and thoughts and processes with other kids. And pretty soon, I think that they acclimate to society better. We always sit in these, in a lot of meetings, and I know I've been to a lot of different community meetings where people are saying, well, how can we, raise this community up? And I've said before, this is like the one tide that rises all boats, I think. And because of the fact that it was a specific goal, I felt that it was comfortable for the council to commit to that, as opposed to just putting into what sometimes is criticized as more money for education, which could be nothing more than administration.
Right.
A lot of times, I think with the Board of Education, when people sort of get hesitant as to giving the Board of Education more money, usually they're concerned about how it's being spent.
Right.
and we target it directly. We did the same thing last year with that 328,000 that we put in one time only.
For real things.
It was for specific items. It
Yeah.
was for laptops, and we wanted it to go to laptops. I think no one has a problem, and I can say this quite openly, that no one has a problem, I think, giving more money to the teachers, to the classrooms, something that directly benefits the children. They are always very reluctant to see any additional expenses going into the administration. Whether that's true or not, whether the administration is cut down as close as it can be, I don't know. That's not something. I know there's about 1.3% increase in their administration over the last year,
And the state watches that.
and the state does too. You're right. So, but there's always that perception that it just dogs the
Right.
education forever.
Right.
It seems. I know a study was done a few years back with the Board of Education and the Sheriff's Department that actually justified all the costs.
Right.
That's many years ago. But to this day, again, we specifically targeted these funds for particular cause, and I think that's a benefit to everybody.
Part of my job is to watch you. And I don't
That's not always a great thing, I know.
and I don't want to mischaracterize this, but I remember when the discussion first came up about pre-K, you were like, really? We're going to do pre-K? But you learned about it and you really evolved in terms of this. And then in the end, you became like the advocate for it.
Well, I had the mindset. You're 100% correct. They're very perceptive. I had the real mindset that I was not going to have the Board of Education. I did not want to see a Board of Education that became a daycare center.
Right.
And I to a certain degree, it was being somewhat, concerned that maybe that was the direction it was trying to do. And
You sounded like your father, in all fairness.
probably could very well have been. But in actually visiting and watching these kids, mix with each other, and what they were learning as 4-year-olds, I realized that at 4 years old, it's not so much a daycare issue as much as it truly is getting those kids into the environment,
A
with
routine.
society.
Something as simple as just a routine.
Yeah, sure. So you're right. Early on, I was somewhat misled from my own perception
Right.
as far as what was involved in starting 4-year-olds. Now, if they want to back down to 3-year-olds or 2-year-olds, I don't know how far I'm going to bend in that direction.
Right.
I'm not quite sure.
Right. Whether the government's ready to take over that part of the role.
Oh yeah, I really have I would have a real serious problem with the government taking over the family element.
Right. Now, one of the things, it's my job to see what's going on and to tell people in the community through the newspaper. And you had the firsthand experience of going into the classroom, seeing the kids, and it changed your thinking. And I feel like I'm a failure because, I can write that to death, but unless people read it and grasp it, their attitudes aren't going to change out there in the field.
Well, I don't think that's any different than any other topic. It's just like you can take pictures of the Grand Canyon, but you can't
see
grasp
it.
it until you actually walk out
Right.
there and see it.
Right.
That's the best analogy.
Yeah, I just wish people could have that experience because I've always thought, with a product of this school system, and I don't think it was a very good school system when I was in it, but with my kids in it, and I'm involved in it now. I mean, they're out now, but been involved in the last 10 years. I'm really impressed with what I see, and I just wish other people could have that same experience.
I think you're right. Hopefully, when the Kerwin Commission comes out with its final report,
Right.
it'll shed some light on that as well. I think the preliminary report is already pretty much pro pre-K,
Right.
and it's going to be very interesting to see exactly what how the state is going to commit to pre-K. I'm pretty certain that's the direction it's going to go.
There have been a lot of events this year in which people have sort of rallied to get spending increase for education. You've been at all of them that I've been at. And when it comes down to like, what's the council going to do? What's the county going to do? Everyone in the room looks at you and they're
Right,
waiting
yeah.
for you to make some sort of commitment. They're all measuring your words very closely as to whether you're going to come through with this. And it's so interesting to watch you because you're like, oh my God, I've got to make a speech here. I want to say I'm encouraged by what they want, but I can't promise anything.
Oh yeah.
What
yeah.
goes through your head in those
Yeah,
situations?
you're trying to figure out. You're trying to figure out how you can be so positively vague.
Right. You want to tell the room what they want to hear, but you
Yeah.
can't commit to something because you've got to go get the other votes.
Sure.
And you might not believe it yourself. I mean, who knows?
And you always have to remember to say personally.
Right.
Personally, my feelings are, and that way, I the last thing I want to do, even as the president of the council, especially as president of the council, is to make any soundbite that commits the entire council to something they haven't even made a decision on yet. So you're right. Yeah, you have to sit there and you have to choose your words very carefully, with some emphasis on what you'd like to see done.
Is it helpful that there are so many people who are advocates for spending more money with education? Does it make that argument easier to deal with the council?
I think when you get the community that really spearheads issues like that, I think it does make a difference. You'd be surprised. Any type of information whatsoever that comes to the council's desk that gives them an objective view of what people's perception might be, and a lot of respected individuals in the community, a lot of conservative individuals in the community were saying, this is, we think this is time that we looked at this and moved forward. And then, of course, as part of the council, which is what we always do, we have to work amongst ourselves and kind of work with each other to decide, the little give and take as to how far we want to go and just what we really do want to commit to. But yeah, when you get the community that gets involved in some things, it's a good thing to have. Mary Ashanti always, has always come to county council meetings. I always attend every NAACP meeting. You keep things on the forefront with any government body, it's never a negative.
I've asked this before to people who've been council presidents, but every day of your life, you need 3 votes to survive.
Yeah, right, yes.
So every night when you go to bed, you're like, do I have 3 votes? I mean, do you think like that? Because the 7-member council, if they wanted to get rid of you as president, or if you want to advance legislation, you have to have 3 votes. What's that like?
Sure. I don't really see that problem a lot because we have a really great council.
And you never know where they're going to go.
Well, I don't think
you might
so.
think John Hall, I got John Hall, but you never know what John Hall's going to do.
Could be. But I think for the most part, I know that we have a very solid and very conservative-based council. And for the most part, I know exactly how I think they're going to vote. And it doesn't mean that they think the way I do, and they agree with me. It's just that we all seem to be very pragmatic in how we approach something.
Right.
And it makes it really easy. I've been on councils before where, you have someone that has been described as wants to throw the grenade in the room
Right.
and then run out. But there's none of that. I don't see a lot of people who will tell you one thing and then, try to manipulate behind the scenes. It doesn't happen. It makes it so easy to manage and to run as a government body when everybody has the best intentions.
Yeah, I will say that in terms of watching that group, it's rare that I detect anything going on behind the scenes. It's done there at the table.
Yes.
And it's very public.
No animosity whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yes, no.
Right.
Complete opposite points of view, complete different votes, no animosity whatsoever. It's enjoyable.
One of the talents you must have learned, though, as being council president, is that when these discussions get off on these tangents and they go in this incredible direction so far away from whatever it is you're talking about. The city council had one this week where they wanted to sign a deal, this energy savings deal, and all of a sudden 3 members of the council declared that they hate Delmarva Power and they don't want to do anything with Delmarva Power. It had nothing to do really with the argument at all, with what they were trying to achieve, but it went nowhere. So this 5-minute thing ended up taking 50 minutes in their meeting.
Sure.
I think they got it back on the rails. It was okay. But I've seen that with you where, but you always remember, like, no, what we're talking about is this other thing. You guys
Right.
can talk all you want about this, whatever,
Yes.
but you find a way to get it back to what the real issue is. And
Right.
that must be hard to learn how to do.
Well, sometimes you just get wrapped up in the conversation itself.
Right.
This just happened at our last meeting. We had a request for sole source vending where we allow only one
That's
one
a
vendor.
no-win argument, yeah.
And it completely strayed for quite a while and part of that was some purchases for the Shorebridge Stadium.
Right.
And of course,
And you want to buy as local as much as you can, which pollutes that argument as well.
yes, and you
Yeah.
do want to buy. Yes, exactly. Well, a lot of it went into a lot of the conversation leaned more towards how was the Shorebridge Stadium doing? How productive were we being? The cost of tickets and a myriad of different issues. I don't always stop it if I think it's a good exchange because we don't always have the opportunity for those individuals to come to the table.
And as a reporter, it's good because news stories happen in the middle of all that. But go ahead.
Yeah, that's probably it's better than sole source vendor. You're not going to get a headline out of that.
Right.
So and I had to eventually correct that and go, okay, guys, we are talking about sole source, so let's isolate just that topic.
Yeah, I can write a story that says Mark Hilmer is still upset that we paid $180,000 to the Shorebirds. Like 2 years later, he's still upset. But it has nothing to do with sole source vending.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So, but You just try to regroup and not feel as if you're stepping on anybody's toes, because you want to give some people a little flexibility to express their thoughts one way or another when they have the chance.
But you don't get caught. I mean, I would get caught up in it, I think. And I remember when I first came back to town as the editor in 1999, the city council, Palmer Gillis and those guys. In fact, your brother was the president of the city council then.
Mm-hmm.
And they and the mayor would yell at each other in these meetings. And they were so amped up with so many emotional issues.
Right.
And you do it completely opposite.
Yeah. Again, I think that's part of what the whole makeup is on the council. We just have a good working relationship with everybody. It strays. Oh yeah, it certainly does stray. When we were doing the issues in reference to poultry houses,
right?
I mean, you saw many
That
of
was
those.
an
meetings.
amazing. That was one of those things I thought where the system completely worked perfectly in every way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it did. I thought by the time we were done, I thought we had a very nice and neat package, and that was a tough one because, believe me, you sometimes try to get out of that fishbowl
Right.
and really try to understand some of the data that's been given to you. We're not in the poultry industry, we're not in the environmental industry, but we have to be experts to make those decisions, or at least try to come close. And surprisingly, so much data that came that was thrown our way. I was pretty much shocked as to how misleading a lot of that data was.
Well, again, not to overcompliment you, but in that debate early on, it would have been easy just to let them have their say and not argue. But you looked at the Hopkins study. You're like, this thing's incredibly flawed.
Right.
And you stood up like in the face of incredible opposition and made that point where
Right.
people booed you and things like that. The other hearings that weren't related exactly to the council.
Right. They booed me because I made a bad joke.
What was the bad joke?
Well, I had said they were talking about. I'm not going to repeat a bad joke. Nice. You always
I'm
got
trying to
it.
remember it. But you stood up and you had the report, you'd read it, and you're like, this doesn't make sense. And technically, no one else was doing that.
Well, I felt compelled to do that when they came to the Civic Center and they were in the Flanders room. This was the Hopkins group, and they had the whole group of them up there.
Right.
And they asked for questions. And I was on the front row with Mark and Joe and Ernie, I think Larry as well. And one of the moderator looked at me.
Was I the moderator for that? Was that the one I moderated?
I don't think you
Okay,
moderated
all
that.
right.
No, this was the radio guy from
Okay.
I think across the bay.
I did the health thing with the county executive. But
Yeah,
okay.
you did that.
All right.
Yeah, you did a very good job.
Thank you.
But
Of course, the people in the audience didn't think so because they actually had their phones out. I don't know if you ever saw
I think
this
they
later.
accused you of manipulating the
Right, and
questions.
they had it zoomed in, and I would like go through the questions, and there'd be like dumb questions and good questions, and I would put the dumb questions aside to ask the more interesting question, and of course it was their question that I put aside because of some bias, but it just wasn't interesting to me.
Right.
That's why you're the moderator guy.
Right.
But anyway, go ahead.
Well, they asked, and so I literally stood up and I said to the entire group, I said, you need to be very, because it was a real,
Yeah.
they were full of themselves on this whole thing. And I just turned to the public and I said, I appreciate them being here, but you need to ask yourself, why does their report discuss poultry houses in Brazil and South Vietnam?
Right.
So the poultry industry has been in the state of Maryland for 100 years. So why doesn't one page of their documentation reference state of Maryland?
Let's talk about what's happening here. And
They
weren't
hated it.
and you weren't dismissive of them. Everyone got their say.
Right.
And they were able to plant the seeds, and all of us thought deeply about what it all meant.
Right.
Do you want 5 houses or 50 houses?
Sure.
What is the answer?
I know.
And we had that community discussion, and then you guys took legislation. I just thought the process worked well.
Yeah, we didn't dismiss it. We did set regulations in line, which I think were very fair to both parties.
Right.
And there's you're going to get a percentage of people who are never completely happy with what your legislation might be.
You're losing 2 good guys on the council here in this election. John Hall's not running again,
Right.
and Matt Holloway.
Right.
Both added a lot to that body.
Sure, they did. Yeah, it's you don't like to see too many things change, and of course everyone's up for election, so there could be
Right.
many more changes than that. It may not even be my concern after November, unless I'm there.
Right.
So that's something as well. But anytime that happens, it's But I think seeing who's coming in and seeing who's interested in those same positions, I think we'll still have a really great group of 7 after November.
Right now in Talbot County, they're talking about getting rid of their tax cap.
Right.
I'm sure you hear about the revenue cap all the time. There's been some action on that. How are you feeling about the revenue cap these days?
You know exactly how I feel about the revenue cap. I have no problem with the revenue cap. I understand people's concerns. What I don't understand is when they say, oh, we've lost $20 million worth of revenue over the last 10 years. We can't get that back. Well, my opinion, well, that's 17 or $20 million that the taxpayers got to keep.
Right.
Heck, that's almost economic stimulus in itself, right? If I told you I was going to save the taxpayers
Right.
$17 million in a year, that would be economic stimulus. But the long and short of it is our budget has increased 17 million in 2 years. It was increasing to the degree that last year the county council reduced the property tax.
Right.
And we did that because we felt it was time to send some of it back.
Right. By a penny.
By a penny.
Yeah.
We could have done
$600,000.
Well, it's actually the cut was $1 million, but then we turned and gave 328 back to through the Board of Education with the one time only.
Right.
But so you have to ask yourself because we're recovering in an economy, and what we're seeing now is income tax receipts are going up. We're seeing that increase a lot. As you know, the property taxes, there's a restriction as far as how much we can increase the revenue year after year based on the revenue cap. But heck, the income tax is still going through the roof, the receipts from that.
Right.
So we're doing very well. And to increase in 2 years by 17 million, why do we need to look at eliminating the revenue cap? And, it's been said, well, this council needs to, they need to step up to the plate and they need to, make some hard decisions. And my opinion is it was done from day one by the voters signing petitions to put a revenue cap on.
Right.
If you want to get it off, don't come to the 7 members of the council. Go out on the street, start that grassroots organization, and if you come back to the council and 62% of the people or a large majority of the people want to put it on the ballot, so be it. But we represent the constituents. I'm not going to get ahead of myself and try to make decisions that I don't think are popular with the general public.
Do you think it's worth the review at this point after 18 years, or just?
Well, I think it's worth a review. I think that the CPI index, I agree with them that the CPI index
it's the wrong way to measure.
is the wrong one.
Yeah.
How often that comes into play, I really couldn't tell you. The fact of whether you use the 2% of the CPI, we're still in a very good position as it is with the large revenue stream that is coming in.
Right. Now, Rick Powell always said it's got to come from the voters. Bob Culver's always said it has to come from the voters. You say that. Now, someone said when he says that, when John Cannon tells you that on TV, ask him why that he wants to do charter changes all the time without anything coming from a referendum from the voters, being initiated by the voters. So the idea is that the council could vote tomorrow to put getting rid of the tax revenue cap on the ballot.
Right. A lot of the charter amendments, and we do have public hearings when we present a charter amendment.
Yeah.
But a lot of the public doesn't have any idea of what the charter entails, nor what changes might be needed to the charter. So that's something that's very close to the actual council itself as the day-to-day operations. It isn't something as broad-based as a property tax would be.
A lot of us thought you would run for county executive this time. You decided not to. You're very busy with your business. Want to talk about that? Do you ever want to be county executive?
Heck, I really don't know at this stage of the game. I mean, I'm running for county council at large this term here, which will be another 4 years, and I'd really have to see what happens after those 4 years. We're all getting older, and you kind of wonder, what type of an obligation you want to make in the future. I was seriously considering it this past time, but I have too many obligations personally and professionally to literally put everything on the side, get into the county, and from 7 a.m. to 7 or 8 p.m. or whatever it might be, and focus only on county. I love it. I like the county. I like everything about county business and trying to see improvements made. But I just could not take everything personally, move it to the side, and spend 4 years in that one committed general direction. So I don't know. As far as the future is concerned, I wouldn't know.
Certainly, when I do the history column, it's very obvious that the Cannons have been really important in this community for a long time. A founding family of Salisbury, the Cannons. Did you grow up like in a special way, knowing you were going to be a leader in the community, or did it just sort of happen? I mean,
I never really thought like that. I don't really think I ever felt, as you say, that it's, an institution or anything like that. I mean, you have a lot of great families in Salisbury, a lot of great families in Salisbury doing an awful lot. I never really looked at the political realm. I remember riding.
your father was in the House of Delegates.
Yeah, and I was very proud of that. I remember riding on the back of a trailer one time in a parade and thought that was kind of cool.
Right.
But I never felt like, that there was anything outside of the ordinary. I just, we went to school, we had our friends, and we did what we did. And not until, I was an adult that I decided, well, maybe I'll do that. I had people who would ask me, and I decided not to on 1 year. And after the elections, I was so upset that I hadn't committed that the next time I threw my hat in the ring right away.
Right. Is that when you ran for House of Delegates?
No, that was actually when I ran for the county council the very first time.
Okay.
Which was, 2006 maybe?
Wow.
2006. And honestly, I should have done it 12, 16 years before then. I should have started much earlier because I enjoy it.
How can people get a hold of you? I'm sure people want to talk to you about poultry and some other issues.
They can get a hold of me anytime they want. They can they can go online. My phone numbers are all online. My cell phone's online, as well as the county office building. They can call me, or they can call Mrs. Hurley or Lynn Sandy at the county office. And I respond quickly.
You have a pretty good crew there, the council administration. They're doing well.
They're doing really
I
well.
thought with Matt Kramer leaving there'd be some weirdness, but it's really a good machine there.
It's been a good transition. Of course, Matt helped choose,
Right.
these individuals.
True, yeah.
And has always been very good at that. He in his day, he had hired every department head in Wycomico County.
Right.
So he has those talents.
Yeah.
And but there's always a particular void, but we are more than absolutely amazed as to how great everybody's doing.
Yeah.
Fantastic job. Same with the internal auditors who are.
Right. You've added to that department a little bit.
Yes, yeah, they're doing absolutely great work as well. They did a lot to help us with the budget over the last year.
Right.
So,
He's John Cannon. He's the president of our county council. We're thrilled to have him here today. Thanks for being here.
great, thanks. Glad to be here.
I'm Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent Newspaper. Another edition of 101 right here on PAC 14.
First Shore Federal is proud to support PAC 14 and One-on-One. We'd encourage every business to support PAC 14 and pick a program and support it, and let's make a difference.